Hi friends, welcome back. Atunde Story here. Glad that you decided to check in on me. I feel loved. In this episode, I want to talk about what's in a name. I want to make sure that first and foremost, I honor you for coming, but I also want to honor you in the state that you're in. And remember, friends, this is me showing up as your guide. If you need to seek additional support, I encourage you to do that. This space is not a space for a therapist, because I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed as a therapist. But I am your guide to show you how life stories hold valuable life lessons. So this is my story. I remember when I was a little girl, I went by many names, right? When I came into the world, my mom named me Tiffany. Beautiful name. Love my name, right? But I realized that I was more than just Tiffany. When I was 6 years old, my great aunt, Helen, love her. She's one of our ancestors now. One of those that guide me, watch over me. When I was a little girl, Helen named me Sookie. And I used to hate that name. I was like, wait a minute. Now, little backstory. Aunt Helen gave everybody in my family a nickname. You know, my siblings had names. And first of all, if you didn't have a name from Aunt Helen, you know, it was like, okay. But Sookie? I'm like, what is a Sookie? But the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, this is Aunt Helen's way of connecting with me. And it was a name that was valuable to her. So by way of her and my love for her, because she raised me. First cup of coffee at her house, you know, I began to love that name, Sookie. I was also called Lemon. For some reason, I didn't smile when I was a little girl. And people like, smile. Which to this day still kind of bothers me, because I feel like my smile don't belong to you. You know, my smile belongs to me. And when I choose to share it, be blessed. So anyway, being called Lemon, those things kind of set on me. You know, I realized that other names people gave me, I was Skinny Minnie. Can't say that now. But those names sat on my skin in a really uncomfortable way. As a black girl growing up, you know, you mean, why are you acting like that? You know, all of those ways in which other people labeled and categorized, they were attributes, right? Not necessarily my name, but it was a way in which others were able to identify me, therefore treat me a certain way or categorize me, because they weren't comfortable with who I was and how I showed up. So they needed to take a piece of me and name that, right? So as I kept going, like, okay, since I'm Lemon, I started to live up to the names that other people called me. Not always good names, but those behaviors showed up as well. Mean, you know, fast, all the names that girls, women get, boys, men get, right? I began to live up to those names, and It really wasn't what I wanted to be, but it was what I was called. And those names stuck to me like glue for a time. As I grew up, I started getting other names. These names sounded like hobbies. You know, I was labeled the singer because I sang. I still sing. Might give you a little bit in one of the episodes. But I was the singer. And anytime I walked in the room, sing something, baby, sing. And I'm like, oh, okay. That is not what I came here to do. But I was known as the singer. When I graduated, I was professor or doctor. My students call me doctor. But it was an attribute. It was a way in which someone can categorize me, a way in which I fit into a box. So I suggest you as a question, what's in a name? The ways in which I started to shift, and I'm looking down because I got some notes here. I shift from these attributes and professions to how I wanted to show up in the world, right? I really started to ask those questions. Who am I? Now let that sit in. Who are you? Only you get to define that. And as I went on and still am going through my life journey, I get to figure that out. At first, I was so afraid because I didn't know who I was. I had lived for many years as what someone else labeled me as. I was daughter. I was friend. I was and still am mother. I was wife. I was classmate. All of those attributes, but never really who I was, who I fully wanted to be, right? So when I was writing my dissertation, I met parts of myself. And what I did as I started to write, and my dissertation, like I talked about in the introduction, the title of my dissertation is To Be Wild and Well, a manifesto for the love of Black girls. I can't forget that part. Yes. My confession of love for Black girls. I'm a Black girl. I got a little extra love for Black girls, right? So my dissertation talked about the ways in which, as a Black girl, young Black girl, I experienced losing parts of myself. When I was 12, I talk about a story when I was in a youth service. I grew up in a very strict religious household when I was a kid. I honor my parents for doing what they know and what they felt was right. But I was in a youth service and I asked a question. I raised my hand and, it was a youth service. I was youth. I was 12, between 12 and 14 years old. And I raised my hand because I'm like, okay, the youth minister is up front and he's like question and answers. And all of the kids are sitting in the church and my mom's there. And he says, who has a question? And I had one. So I raised my hand and I asked my question. To this day, can't really remember what the question was. But I remember the response that I got. And it broke something in me. Because the response was a bit harsh. It was jarring. It was unexpected because It was a youth service. Why not ask a question? And I wrote about how I left a piece of myself. The piece of me that asks questions out loud. Because I still ask questions. I always did. But I stopped asking questions out loud to people that would or could have known the answers to those questions. Vital questions for me as a Black girl. And without asking questions, I got myself into a lot of sticky situations. But as I wrote about those stories, I realized that I have left a lot of me broken pieces in a lot of places. So I started doing the work of collecting those broken pieces of myself. I saw my life as a broken mirror, and I was standing in front of this mirror, all cracked up. Think about somebody taking a sledgehammer to your mirror. That's the trauma that shows up in our lives. Sometimes small cracks, sometimes big gaping holes. But I knew that there was a reflection of something great and something beautiful there, although it was all cracked. So I had to go back and get those broken pieces of myself. So I'm a storyteller. I'm also a writer. So I started to write out my stories. And I remember as I started to dig, because I took my hands, friends, we got to dig in the soil, right? Dig in the soil. That is the garden of our lives. More pieces of me started to come up. Trauma, pain, those memories, right? So I started having a lot of these things show up and not know what to do with them. So I wrote. I didn't know what to do with them because I knew that I needed to keep them. So I just wrote about them, right? So in those stories, I started to realize parts of me that I had given away, parts of me that I had made available that I shouldn't have, parts of me that I should have kept to myself. You know, I was recognizing the brokenness that was in me that was saving people. That was one of my things, right? I was a superhero. But as I realized, hey, you're only a superhero because someone else said that you were supposed to be a superhero. Black women are superheroes. That was a narrative that I had strapped on. As I wrote about this brokenness in this attachment to being a superhero, saving others, I realized I needed saving. And who was going to save me? One of the most pivotal things as I wrote my stories was realizing that ain't nobody coming to save you, girl. So you got to save yourself. So I became the young woman who saved herself. I'm going to help you understand what saving looks like for me. Because saving for you might look a little different. You know, I noticed that in my healing, I recognized that I was a healer. All of us are healers. It's just the part or the work of healing that you're assigned to do. So my superhero persona in my brokenness and my trauma was just a distorted reflection of the healer that I really am, right? But I don't facilitate your healing. You do. As a healer, I had to recognize that I got to heal me first. And I get to live whole in front of you. That's what a healer does. A healer helps to usher you in to the place of healing. But you have to take that healing in. As your guide, I'm going to show you what I did. Because friends, healing is no trifling matter. Some of us stay broken because that's the most familiar parts of ourselves. It's the part that is comfortable. It's the part that is of least resistance. At least I know what's coming. It doesn't catch you off guard. I get it. It wasn't easy to start looking at myself in these little broken shards. But I needed to examine them because I needed to fix my mirror. Because my mirror was distorted. Superhero was looking back at me when I was a healer. So I had to clean that shard and figure out where to place it in my mirror. Our mirrors, our broken mirrors, are like puzzles, right? You got to unearth to find those pieces and then figure out where they go in our mirror. And I've done a lot of that work. Still realizing that I got some pieces that are still missing, and that's the fun part for me now, because my goal has become being my full self, being my whole self, being my most authentic, honest, liberated self. And I encourage you to be that to you too. So for me, like I said, the more I examined me, the more me showed up. I remember being in Ohio, sitting at my table, ruminating over yet another moment of realization of the trauma that I experienced in my life. And another part of me showed up. As I made room for myself, more of me started to come up. So as these selves, right, because they're part of me, this part of myself and that part of myself and another part of myself started to be comfortable sharing her stories. So many of them showed up that I had to give them names. Child, I had Tiffany 6 show up. And then Tiffany 60 showed up. And I was like, wait a minute, a sister is not that old. You know, I'm not there yet. But I realized that they were my past self and my future self. So I was like, okay, I get it. So 6, tell me what's up. And I had to listen to her. Because when I looked at 60, Tiffany 60, as I had named her, I wanted to be more like her. Because she was calm, but not calm as in I'm going to be quiet. Because she had a roar about her. But she was centered and aligned and attuned with herself. And I was like, oh, yes, I want to be like her. But I wasn't her. In my present moment, I was a mess, child. I had all these stories. I'm like, oh my God, help me, please. More help showed up. As I made room for my stories, Tiffany 12 showed up. My 18-year-old self showed up. Gotta tell you about her. My 25-year-old self showed up. And child, my 80-year-old self showed up. Red lipstick and all. I like her. The more I made room for myself and my story, the more of my story came to me. And my stories allowed me to heal, to get myself together, to stop hating on, because you know we can hate on ourselves. We can be self-haters. Been there. It allowed me to stop hating on parts of me and to embrace her as imperfectly perfect, because she's good enough for me. Not without work. Because as you'll go on, you'll realize, yeah, you got this story, you got this nugget, you got this broken shard. I don't want it. I don't know what to do with it. It involves stuff that I can't fix, I can't change. I can't go back to the past and, right? All of the things that we say. But I want to encourage you that that's not the work that you need to do. The work of remembering your story is the work. Our pain and our trauma need a place to rest. And if we don't remember it, it doesn't rest. It stays bottled up in us and it tears us up on the inside. Our stories come to us to be lifted. Some need to be buried, put to rest without shame and guilt. Some need to be held. Some need to be told about herself or himself, yes, I can fix it. But all of it needs to be heard and seen. Friends, what I realized when I asked my question is that I was seen as something that I was not. And when I went back to that moment, I realized that maybe the person who responded to me so harshly didn't know how to see me as the wonderful, inquisitive, critically self-reflexive young woman that I was becoming. Maybe that person was afraid for me. How dare you ask such a question, young lady? That is not the place for this. You're not safe asking such a question. So maybe she thought she needed to chastise me so that I wouldn't do that again, right? You ever been whipped for something that you almost did and quite didn't do, and you was in the room and you didn't stop it and all of that? Our elders love us in ways that sometimes we don't understand, but we lovingly release them so that we can release ourselves. I was mad with my mama too, because I'm like, girl, didn't you just hear her? There's another black woman, right? So I'm mad with mama, mad with the person who responded to my question. But I had to go back there and feel my feelings. Let all of that come back up. The shame, because I was standing up and everybody was looking at me, and I slid down in my seat. My mama didn't say anything, and you didn't defend me. But as I revisited that moment, I was able to take a panoramic view and see everybody in the room. I didn't necessarily have to slide back into the pain. I'm going to teach you how to do that too. When you revisit your stories, you revisit them just to take notes. And not to be in the moment again, friends. As your guide, I'm going to show you how I did that. Because I do not want you to re-injure yourself, but I do want you to go back to the moment to gather the data, get the good parts, throw the parts away that you don't need. The pain is not what you need. You need the information. What did I learn? What I learned is that it's hard out here for a sister. My mama, the woman who responded to me, it's hard out here. We're not always well received. We're expected to behave a certain way, to be a certain way, to act a certain way in certain situations, be all to everybody else, but nothing to ourselves. And in the conditioning of life, we're deformed and transformed into something that is not who we were meant to be. And as I revisited that moment in my own pain, in my own memory, I was able to see my mother. Why possibly she did not respond and defend me in the way that I thought she should. I was able to turn and see the woman who responded to me, and see the love in her voice, the fear in her voice. Maybe she asked the same question when she was a little girl and it didn't turn out right for her either. And she responded to me in the same way that she was responded to. Don't know. But I was able to leave the pain there and to pick up my voice, because that's where I'd left it. She here now. Last note. As I named all of the cells, right? Like I said, there was so many of them. Tiffany 6, so I started calling them T, because T was a nickname I had. My siblings, it was either T or Tiff, right? So I called them. I was like T6, T12, because they all in the room, and I had to give them a name. But the more they told their stories, they shared their names with me. One's Desire, because I have hopes, dreams, and desires. And when I revisited her stories, I started to reclaim some of the stuff that I wanted, that I figured that I couldn't have because of, right? I had to grab a hold of desire. Righteous indignation, or Riri, gotta watch her. I was an angry little girl. But the more I listened to her stories, I felt in her story she had a right to be angry. So rather than naming her an angry black woman, I called her righteous indignation. Or she called herself that anyway. I had a part of me called fulfilled, because I had completed a part of myself and I was fulfilled. Then I tapped into desire, and now we're moving on, turning the page in our storybook, because we got some more stuff to do, right? So my selves started to reveal themselves and their names. So When I realized I had these collections of selves, I also realized that they weren't going nowhere. They felt welcomed. They felt like they had a place in my life. They felt as if they could share parts of themselves that no one was ready or able to listen to. So, as I realized that I was the one listening to the stories because I was really the only one that needed to hear them, the name Atunde came to me. Atunde is a Yoruba word that means we have returned. That's all I have for you today, friends. Hope my story inspires you to go get parts of yourself so you can decide, who am I? Because I am free. I am liberated. I am happy. Sometimes I'm hungry, but I'm full of joy. I am authentic. I am well. That's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, comment below. Who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself. I'll see you next time. Be well. I'm Atunde, and this has been my story. Bye for now.